You need to learn how to be alone. Um, Most people will never be okay with being alone, and fundamentally, that's flawed. And on the surface, there's nothing wrong with that. Like, we're social creatures and we crave attention, you know? I crave attention. I'm making this video, so hopefully people can see it. But you need to learn how to be alone. One of my ex girlfriends told me this about a year or two after we broke up, a long time ago, and she said, "Yeah, you're really good at being alone." Um, and it is. I take it as a great compliment, but it's something that's always stuck with me because you're really good at being alone, and I didn't really take that for what it was for a long time. I just kind of like was more hurt by it than anything, even though I wasn't mad at it. But the fundamentals of being good at being alone is that if you depend upon others for everything, if your happiness is dependent on other people's actions and what they're going to do, you will always be upset. If your happiness is dependent on other people doing the right thing 100% of the time, you are always going to be upset 100% of the time. Um, you need to learn how to be okay being by yourself. There's a difference between being lonely and being alone. Lonely is for people who constantly crave attention and they seek so many people and then they just get rejected after rejection after rejection, and then suddenly it just cripples them. But being alone is more of a feeling of solitude, and it's such a freeing feeling purposefully being alone, because when you're alone, that is when you really learn who you are, and that's when you actually start to grow. Um, in the Bible, God talks to people when they're alone. He never talks to anyone in a crowd. I mean, he took Moses behind Mount Sinai before he talked to him, you know? Um, and the truth is that you can't expect God to show you who you are, or to show you who you need to be or what you need to do if you're always surrounding yourself with so much noise. I mean, if you're going out partying every single weekend, you are wasting so much time that you could instead be spending thinking. You'd be better off thinking for 3 hours than scrolling for 3 hours, right? And it's like everyone knows this and everyone really accepts this as a truth for the most part, but yet no one does it. Because when you actually start to sit down, like when I started to turn off my phone and stop scrolling, that's when I started to realize that I have more to offer, that I actually am capable. I mean, there was a version of me before I started exercising or posting content or believing in myself that was the most depressed, most antisocial, most lonely person. And I was the most depressed and anxious and suicidal person you'd ever meet. And then I started to believe in myself, and I started to be alone, and I started to study, and I started to think more, and I started to meditate, and I started to pray, and I started to journal and to write down my thoughts. And when I started to do that is when I really started to quote unquote ascend. A lot of ways in my physical appearance, but mostly mentally and spiritually. Like, I have a lot of coworkers that get so hurt by everything. Like, if we get an order that pops up on the screen, you know, we have to make an order, like that's our job, they get so mad. Or if we're too busy, their cortisol will be through the roof, they'll be freaking out, they'll be upset, you know? Or if somebody else does their job a little wrong, they'll get so upset and they'll just be bugged. Or if they have to work a lot that week, they'll just be mad and they'll just be angry, and you can tell. But it's like when I have to work a lot, I just take that in, I just breathe. I'm like, okay, fire, hours, good, money. When there's a lot of orders on the screen, I'm like, okay, I'm just getting better at my job. And I kind of notice it as a good comparison. Like, obviously, be very limited about who you compare yourself to, but I find it interesting to compare myself to people who are always stressed out and always angry and upset at the world, because the reality is that if they had my problems, they would be 10 times more upset than me. You know, they would, like truthfully. And it's because in my time alone, I started to realize that you are always going to have problems, and it's about how you react to those problems that actually shapes who you are. And the reality is that these people that are so stressed out and anxious all the time and angry at the world, at everything, are the same people who scroll 5 hours a day on their phone. Why do you think that is? It's because they're frying their dopamine. They don't give themselves a single second out of any single day to think. And when they are alone after work, you know, they get home, they lay in bed for a second, and they start thinking, they get uncomfortable, so they pull out their phone and start scrolling, or they put on a YouTube video or a show. So they never get to think. And when you never get to think, you never get to learn who you are. And when you never know who you are always in an identity crisis. You know, you are always struggling to figure out who you are because you don't give yourself enough time to figure out who you are. When you let yourself be alone, you let yourself transform into who you are. And it's not to say that you should purposefully not hang out with people all the time, or that you should be like the alpha monk, right? But it's like, if you find yourself in a situation, you're at home, you're watching a show, or you're scrolling, or whatever, turn your screen off and just see what it's like to sit in silence for 5 minutes. And just think and reflect on what you thought about. You know, take 2 minutes to analyze the creases and the details in your hand. It's nice. It's a great feeling. You'll end up feeling so calm and relaxed. Take 30 minutes to pick up your notebook and write down. If you don't have a piece of paper or a pen, pull out your phone and think. You know, type down like what your thoughts are. And you'll start to realize a lot of things about yourself and your life, and you'll have realizations about things that you want to do or that you need to do, or about passions that you have, or about things that you always want to do. I say this in a lot of my videos, and I'm going to keep saying it, and that's that 99% of people will never try. The reality about being successful, in my eyes, isn't about having millions of dollars, although that is a goal. It's not about being the most famous person on social media, although that is a goal. Being successful isn't about those things. It's about being able to be proud of who you are, and not in a sense of pride or ego, but in a sense of, I can look at myself in the mirror and be like, yeah, I'm proud of who I am becoming and who I have become. And most of your growth is going to come from being alone. And if you can't learn how to be alone, you are going to miss out on all of this growth. You're going to miss out on so much growth that it's not even funny. Like, force yourself to be alone. If you hate your life, if you hate a lot of who you are, if you are really confused about what you need to do in life, force yourself to be alone. And think in complete silence. You know, turn off the music for a second. See what you think about. You will learn an extraordinary amount about yourself, and that information and that knowledge that you will gain about yourself and about the world and about God is the stuff that is going to carry you and make everything else better. Remember that. That's it. Good night.